Welcome everyone to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, January the 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. I'd like to remind all participants that this will be recorded for public access broadcast. With that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda this evening, please? So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Colwell. And do I have any questions to that motion? Seeing no questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. I'll just remind everyone there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. Should anything on the agenda be of a conflict, please fill that in and pass it in to the clerk, stating the reason why. That will move on to item number 4, new business. Item number 1, Salisbury 250 programming overview. We'll ask Kate Doucette to come up and do a presentation.
Yeah. I'm up first, so
You're up first.
we were playing around with this earlier, so hopefully it'll work, but I appreciate the time tonight. I know a lot of you probably have heard a few announcements. We've been putting stuff out in January about Salisbury 250, but I thought this was a good opportunity to go a little more in depth in the programming and what to expect during the year. So during this presentation, I'm going to be talking about Salisbury 250 and what it is, kind of what we're celebrating and how we plan to do so. The Salisbury 250 committee, some other special projects and how we plan to get some community involvement and funding, to make all of this possible. So if we start right in with Salisbury 250 and what it is, 2024 is the 250th anniversary of permanent settlements. So a common misconception here is that it's the birthday of Salisbury, but it's not really, because it's not the anniversary of the incorporation. So what was the village was incorporated in 1967 and what is now the town 2023. But this goes back all the way back to the permanent settlements when the Yorkshire settlers came over. So the goal of this is to kind of look at it as a celebration of heritage and history and build that connection with residents. So we have a lot of that shared heritage that we want to educate the residents on and kind of bring the community together with that. So there's a lot of history to cover here. It's 250 years worth, so we have a lot to cram into a year, but the committee is up for the task. So obviously there's more than 250 years. The world did not begin 250 years ago, so we have all of that stuff that comes before. So although 1774 kind of wraps it up neatly into 250 years, we have that date in record. We know that we had Acadian and Indigenous settlers here prior to that, but the date of that is kind of rough. So although we're calling it Salisbury 250, we know that those early settlers tie into almost every element that we'll be talking about. But we will also have special focus on what came before those 250 years, including those Acadian and Indigenous settlements. So as some of you may have seen, we have divided the year up into 12 separate themes. So we're calling these the central themes. So this kind of neatly packs those more than 250 years into a neat little 12 months. So we're calling this central themes because they're larger themes that those smaller elements in history can kind of fit into. So a good example here would be transportation, which is February's theme. We can talk about the railway station that was in Salisbury, which is a huge part of our history. But then we can also tie that into the Petitcodiac River and how the Indigenous settlements would, use that as their main method of travel with kayaks and canoes, etc. So as you saw there, January, we're focusing on the Silver Fox. So on January 16th, Connie Colpitts delivered a fantastic presentation. It was well attended, kind of surprisingly due to the weather. If any of you were out on that evening, we were in the middle of a snowstorm. But even with that, it was well attended. We've heard nothing but positive reviews. And we did manage to get a recorded copy of that. So it has been posted, it's on YouTube. As of now, I think it's just over 300 views, and that's not including the 50 to 60 people that came and watched it live. So let's talk a little bit about the 250 committee because they're playing a huge role in planning this. There's some brilliant minds that are sitting on this committee that I know I'm relying on heavily, because if I didn't have them there, I think I'd be pulling my hair out. So we wanted to get that local knowledge and community input to make sure that we're capturing the right highlights and the right events that are significant in the history. And it also provides an opportunity for these residents to engage other residents. They kind of have that connection with them. So going back to that goal of kind of engaging the community and bringing the community together through that heritage, it's a community project that needs community involvement at the head of it. So they're kind of leading it, and you'll see them at all of these different events. They have a nice little pin that says 250 committee member. So if you see them at any of these events, be sure to thank them for all their hard work. So if we go into the committee members, the Salisbury 250 committee is comprised of staff members, council members, and community members. So we have 3 staff, including myself, Austin, and Diane. 3 council members, including Mayor Rob Campbell, Deputy Mayor Phyllis Bannister, and Councillor Sarah Caldwell. We also have 4 community members, including Connie Colpitz, Krista Ingraham-Cote, Gordon Close, and Jonathan Crosby. So this is what I'm calling the dream team for 2024. They'll be putting their heads together and putting out some wonderful events for everyone to enjoy during the year. So among those central events that we talked about with the 12 themes, we have a number of special projects that we're going to be putting out during the year, and a number of different ways we want to get the community involved. So just to name a few off the top, we have a banner program that's similar to the veteran banners that we usually put up. So this will be a number of significant elements in Salisbury's history that we will honor with banners. And we're also going to incorporate sort of a walking tour of sorts, where there will be biographies of each of these elements on the website, so people can read through them as they're walking down the streets of Salisbury to learn a little bit more about this people. We're in the works of getting a 250 documentary up. So this will be about a 25 to 30-minute documentary, kind of in an interview style, to sort of capture those stories of community members, local subject matter experts, to kind of preserve this history and keep those stories alive. We're hoping to involve local artists in several projects, whether that be art shows in general, mural paintings, bringing it into the amphitheater design, stuff like that. Another thing that I forgot to put on the slideshow is that we're in the works of getting a merch store up and running. So this will be completely online. There's no cost to this, so all of the money that the merch is paid for goes right to DNA Swag, who we're going through the merch store with. We have decided to adjust the price, so we've rounded it up to an increment of $5, I believe, $5. And so these additional funds will go towards the FAR program, which I think is next on the docket tonight. So you'll hear a little more about that from Masson. When it comes to community involvement in each of these elements, we do want to put out a public call, public nominations. Our public nominations for the banners closed on January 17th, so the committee is in the process of reviewing those. We want to put out a public call for infos, get pictures, artifacts, stories, as much as we can. So when it comes to funding, we have a lot on the docket, and as we all know, things cost a lot of money. So there's a big thank you that goes out to the sponsors of this project. The project was made possible by the Government of Canada and the Government of New Brunswick. So thank you to these sponsors for their financial contribution and their support with this project. In general, this was kind of like a brief overview of what the year is going to look like. If you do wish to stay up to date, the best place to do that would be through our website. We will be posting occasionally on the Facebook page, but the main kind of hub for everything will be on the website. So as soon as you go on the website, there's a little tab at the top that says Salisbury 250. You can find all your information there. So with that, hopefully I didn't talk too much, but thank you for your time this evening, and enjoy your
Great. Very exciting, Katie.
Yes.
Moving on to item number 2. Any questions?
I was just saying thank you. Sorry.
Moving on to item number 2, proposed financial assistance for recreation policy, and Massimo. Director of Recreation,
everyone.
So I'm nowhere near the presenter that Katie is. I apologize in advance. So I will be presenting on the financial assistance recreations, which is just called FIRE, short. The presentation today I'll be going through the proposed FIRE program, the FIRE streams, the governance of the program, next steps, and we'll also discuss questions, which I'm sure many of you might have. I'll also try to be quick so we can get those questions. Proposed FIRE program. So, basically, it's a strategic plan item under the community and quality of life pillar to introduce the FIRE program. It's aimed to support costs of organized recreation as well as associated costs, which is like gas, equipment, hotel, all that kind of stuff that might prohibit some people from participating in organized recreation. So when we think of this, we kind of think of Jumpstart through Canadian Tire, right? It is quite similar. However, we do want to kind of widen the umbrella of what we consider recreation. So summer camps, for example, we do have arts, theaters, stuff like that that will really allow more people to participate. And I'll also go into more detail about how it does differ from things like Kids Sport Jumpstart moving forward. To be eligible for the program, it'll be residents within the town of Salisbury. The residents will need to be 4 to 18 years of age. Obviously, the families will be the ones applying, but they'll be applying for the children that are 4 to 18 years of age. You'll have to be part of a program that is at least 4 weeks long, or if it's a camp, it has to be 5 days in duration. There are examples. For example, I did want to consider gym membership as an option for kids 16 to 18. There would be a certain minimum of that, and we'd likely go 6 months, for example. And it would also be $300 per calendar year per child, and up to a maximum of $500 per family. So if a family has 6 children, they will be limited to $500. Approval is subject to funds and will be prioritized based on a series of priorities identified in the town's policy, which I'll go through later in the priority matrix. The streams. So we have a stream called RAG, so that's the Registration Assistance Grant. And we also have the Gas Equipment and Transportation Fund, so the GET Fund. I'll go through registration first. So we have 3 times per year intake. So we'll have an intake in May, an intake in September, and an intake in January. And basically that will allow us to kind of allocate funds per season. So obviously we'll have a time dedicated, not necessarily just to baseball, but summer camps, all that stuff. There's one kind of more around hockey and basketball seasons around that kind of stuff. But obviously there's things that happen all year long, like an arts program or what have you. So for the registration, there is a requirement to identify financial need. The low income cutoff, I think that's what LICO is. It's a system that Revenue Canada has, and I have the numbers here if you guys are curious about what the numbers look like. Applicants that fit that criteria will be required to apply for Jumpstart prior to applying for FIRE. And basically we would be covering the remainder of that. If we go into the Gas and Equipment and Transportation Fund, you'll also see that those who do fit the LICO criteria in Jumpstart will automatically be eligible for the GET Fund. Successful applicants will have notice sent to the organization, so the organization will be aware that they've been approved. For the GET Fund, it will be an ongoing intake, so I'll be reviewing those year-round, not just 3 times a year. I'll cover the costs beyond registration that are often prohibiting people from participating. So that would mostly be gas, likely equipment, hotel, transportation, stuff like that. As I mentioned, if they are in the LICO, they're pre-qualified, and funding is reimbursed upon receipt of the specific item. So if they were to go buy some used skates, they would provide us with the receipt and they would be then reimbursed. So the application process is quite simple. I kind of already went through it, but the only thing different is the third point in registration there. So notification of decisions will be within 4 weeks for the registration. The RAG, and funding decision made within 10 days for the GET. Everything before that I kind of went through already. And that's already been discussed, and funding provided directly to recipient to a maximum awarded amount. So that's already been discussed as well. This is the priority matrix that I referred to earlier. So in order to disperse accordingly, funding is prioritized as the following. So basically we would still consider low income as a priority. And then we move to activities that take place within Salisbury. And then third, most important would be multiple sport groups. So that's obviously multiple sport participants. Someone that plays baseball, someone that plays hockey, someone that plays basketball, which are a lot of kids. I speak with them all the time. So those would also be a priority as well. Governance of the program. So municipal council, you folks, revise, adopt fire program as required, authorize use of municipal resources to administer the program, and approve TOR of oversight committee as required. My department would prepare annual reports for the program and ensure sustainability of the programming and fundraising efforts. The community enhancement committee, which I'm sure you might have questions about, that I'd be happy to answer. They will lead the fire fundraisers, sponsorships as well, and recommend changes to the program, which I will like to hear because I'm hoping that there will be community members as part of this enhancement community. So they will be maybe the applicants. They might know the applicants. So hearing from them will be very important. Fundraising. So we actually have secured a $10,000 donation for the fire program prior to finalizing the policy. Which is fantastic. Following approval in principle, the policy staff will begin working on branding, marketing materials for the program using town funds budgeted in fire for 2024. Fundraising efforts will be commenced upon approval and increasing funds for the program. 2024 Rec and Wellness luncheons will be also allocated. I've already spoke to the Legion. We're hoping to have at least one for sure, and then hopefully two ideally would be nice for those luncheons. Funds are allocated towards each stream, prioritizing registration as funds allow based on priority matrix identified in the policy. I'm happy to talk more if you guys have questions about the prioritization matrix and how we'd be allocating funds, especially through those 3 periods of time where we're looking at registration applications. I'm happy to kind of discuss more about how we've been prioritizing, how much is going where. Next steps. So today, approve policy, or sorry, no, January committee of the whole, approve policy in principle. January, begin fundraising efforts for additional donations. Also in January, begin exploring options for premium sponsor for the Get stream. And February, finalize branding for fire program and develop marketing materials. February council, approve policy, and by May, first intake, which allows us to have a bit of time between February and May, obviously, to kind of really prepare it. And this is kind of my baby going forward, so I'm really excited taking this forward. And then I think that's it. Any questions?
I have a couple, but
Me too.
Okay. Go
Before we start questions.
What's that?
Want a motion before we start with questions?
Yes, because there is a motion for this one. Yeah.
oh, I'll do that. That Salisbury Town Council approve the financial assistance for recreation policy for official ratification at an upcoming meeting of council. So moved.
Second by Councilor Thorne, second by Councilor Openness. Please note that we will have an official vote at the council meeting on this. Questions to the proposal?
Still a vote after the questions, but it doesn't get
Okay.
ratified.
I'll-
Yes.
For the rag and the get, is it 3 to 500 each? Or 3 to
No,
500 total per family,
Total per-
per person?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
So if you were to accept the, say, 200, if you were pre-approved for 200 of the Get, for the RAG, you would only then be eligible for another 100 if it's just one child for the Get, if that's something you're looking to apply for later on in the year.
And then I just wanted to make a comment because I think this is fantastic. And I know like being involved in some of these sports organizations, we've often talked about being able to help support families. It might be worth reaching out to the local organizations to see if they want to donate, because if you can govern this, it would be an easier, like easier for some of these associations to not have to govern it, but be able to support it at the
If
same
if it's
time.
approved, I will take any recommendations. I was gonna
Yeah.
talk to as many people as possible moving forward if this is approved, so.
Because I think the governing part is the hardest part,
Mhm.
fairness and perceptions and all that stuff, but the people want to help, so I think it's a good. Yeah, good job.
And they'll get a notice, Massimo, too, like the groups, the associations,
Yes, yeah.
because we'll want to notify them saying, hey, look, you may get a letter in June saying X participants that are registering for your program are going to receive subsidy through the town. So they'll need to know that the program's coming, so that we can also have them on the list for it.
How does this work, Massimo, in correlation to other programs such as Jumpstart? Can they do multiple streams on that, or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So, especially for registrations, the individual child grant, which is through Jumpstart, is probably the most common that we've all heard of.
Mhm.
They actually use the exact same LICO that
Mhm.
I'm using and for that reason. So if a family were to meet the LICO criteria for their, family size, we would have them apply because that's still something to be eligible for. But normally it covers up to 80% depending on the child. And also the LICO is quite low. There's a lot of families probably in this area that are teetering on that line, not quite eligible for Jumpstart, that still need assistance, which is evident by the price of everything nowadays.
Absolutely.
So really, that's kind of where we want to address is not necessarily just the people that are eligible for Jumpstart, which are not a lot,
No.
believe it or not. So we really still want those families to apply for Jumpstart and us support them beyond that, because they'll still need support beyond that. If they get 80% coverage for registration, it's fucking expensive
Oh, that's-
beyond registration. So, okay, let's cover a hotel cost for a tournament or some gear that they might not have access to because of the price. Yeah, I'm looking to buy gloves myself and they're $250 right now. So it's to address that as
I
well.
think it's fantastic. Yeah, I guess I was just kind of curious on, and that's just later from a double dipping perspective on taking the same receipt and going to both organizations. But
Yeah.
I'm sure that the associations and different people will look at that, but.
Most will only cover registrations, so most of the others, that's why our.
No, I know, but I was getting at if an individual goes, takes the registration,
Mhm.
does it a Jumpstart,
Yeah.
also does it to their, if there's no comparison on the books.
That's why ours will go straight to ours will go straight to the group, which I know Jumpstart does. I don't know about the others.
It does.
for sure.
Require it to come
That's cool.
directly
Yeah.
to us.
I also
That's great.
For
know
that
for a
reason.
fact that as athletic and as fit as a community as we are, there's probably kids that want to participate in theater, that want to
Yes.
participate in
Absolutely.
the arts.
Yes,
Theater might not be accessible in Salisbury, but we still want to allow people in Salisbury to participate in stuff like that, which Jumpstart doesn't
It's
cover.
amazing, particularly with the
Yeah.
gas and those type of things, as Councilor Colwell knows. There's individuals that if other parents didn't
yeah.
carpool or
Carpool.
share and allow them to stay in hotel rooms and that, we know that opportunity, so kudos to you.
Kudos.
And obviously, I'm just gonna recommend as this program expands and gets really popular and, there will be some administration on your end that, obviously we're gonna have to account for and, make sure you're vocal about that.
All right.
Oh, yeah, my question was around just the legal considerations that you have. In here, I'm just wondering what's the timeline of knowing for sure if we're allowed to do this?
So we're definitely allowed to do it. It's
Yeah.
the different, basically thresholds of them. So,
Right,
if you look on CRA's website sorry to jump in on the legal side of things, Massimo.
Please.
The CRA guidelines say, and I quote, "This is where it gets very complicated when it comes to donations or sponsorship." So
right,
essentially, we just have to set a limit, and it's ultimately going to be a decision of council as to putting a value on a sponsorship if it's recognized. So
Okay.
that's that distinction. And generally, there's no policy to outline it. So when it's outlined and it says the value of this type of recognition that you will get in return for a donation,
mhm,
or a sponsorship. When it's outlined in a policy, that's generally when we can refer back to and say, if you're giving, like the limit is 5,000, so if you're giving 6,000, 5,000 is considered. So I suspect that will be the response that we'll get. But as long as it's written, that's what CRA wants to
Yeah.
have.
okay.
Yeah.
I just don't want it to hold us up.
It won't hold us up. It won't hold us up. Yeah. Technically, this is sufficient. But and the other thing that we'll have to, and we can still use the former CRA status, I guess they call it, to be able to continue it. It's just, it'll be tidier if we create a new one
Yeah.
for the town. That's all. So one exists now and we're okay to do that. It's just that it's tidier to do it the other way, to do a new one.
Lovely.
There's another question. Okay,
Please.
you go first.
How much do you anticipate needing annually to run this program?
Oh,
What,
that's good.
what do you expect the demand will be on it?
So that is a great question. I've looked at registration for all major sports. Obviously, I can't look outside of that just because that's what I have access to. And if we were to look at Jumpstart's percentages, like usually about 10% of a community would apply to a Jumpstart program. I'm assuming it's gonna be much more than that. So realistically, in terms of our goal, my goal, I don't think Austin and I actually spoke about it, but 20 to 25,000 would be very good. That's kind of the number that I've been using in terms of my prediction and how to allocate funds per time. So like I mentioned, there was a September registration application, a May and a March. Might have forgotten those. But basically, I'm taking the 25,000 as an idea and then kind of splitting that up into three, and then obviously allocating some to the GET program as well. But realistically, it's something that I'm still looking at. Obviously, we are lucky enough to have the $10,000, both in 2020, actually, there was some allocated in 2023 and then also in 2024. But moving forward, we are aiming to kind of double that at least, to kind of, based off of my understanding of who would likely be applying, would be sufficient.
Is that 10,000 from our budget?
No,
What's in our budget? toward-
2,000.
Two. Okay.
Which is basically gonna cover marketing,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
the rest will go, but it'll give us a kickstart on the.
I'd be interested to know, like, in budget season for 2025,
for
like,
sure, Yeah.
Sure.
can we put more in?
Absolutely. I love the idea you're crossing multiple areas culturally as well, which is really important.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
Right,
never something I cared much about when I was a kid, but I have a bunch of artists in the family and one of them couldn't afford it until they were out of high school. So like I spoke with her and she's like, I would have loved something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel like there's definitely a few people at least that would benefit from that.
I think Councillor Thorne's point too, I think getting the numbers at the time for budget, there are a lot of families struggling and we definitely want to ensure no kids are left behind.
Maybe we can do after the first intake, we can come back with just a status to say, look, we've launched it, this is the intake. And if we have, because if it could very much happen as we kind of call this a pilot as we figure out what it needs to look like when we go through the actual process. We can only think of so many scenarios in our head until we put it out there. We can come back in, so if we do May, maybe in June before the summer and say, look, this is what the first intake looked like. And make some sort of more calculated predictions, because the Massimo's point, they're guesses right now.
Yeah.
Oh, but I would
So
love
we can do that.
updates, yeah.
I will be very detailed and thorough with my data collection.
I think the positive of this is to get the people that aren't currently
Mhm.
participating,
Yeah.
because, you know, as I can use basketball as an example, we have about 180 to 200 children in our greater community, and we get 2 to 4 jump starts a year, which is very, very low,
Yeah.
right? When you think of the number of kids that we have, so there's likely a lot of other children that just don't,
How do, you know,
Register?
because some families may not even know about it or
but I think that's,
or
the-
be
that's,
too
that's
embarrassed to do it.
kind of the note I made is I think it's important to get it out there so that the organizations can promote it at time of registration to say, here are your options. And
Yeah.
promote it that way so that people can,
Quickly mention
Like
that.
an
And that it's
intentional
anonymous so that
marketing.
people can.
right? Just to be able to, because most people just see registration and they bypass it because they know they can't
Yeah.
afford something, and that's not, you wanna have like a focused
Hmm.
deposit.
Do this, this is-
I do have a question. Have we set a percentage that we're gonna cover of the registration, like where Jumpstart will cover up to 80% of the registration?
We'd cover the remainder.
We'll
Because
cover
likely
the
will
remainder?
be- If we do a maximum of 300, there's no way that it'd be more than 300, right?
Well, I don't know.
Depends.
I know sporting registrations. I don't know art registrations or art classes or anything like that, so.
Good point, yeah.
You know, are we protecting ourselves from a situation where one family is getting $100 for something and another family is only gonna get $50 kind of deal?
Right.
So, and is that a discretion of yours as you're reviewing them?
It will likely be by discretion, but also we would consider there would be, like, if there was an 80% coverage and someone had less coming from us compared to someone else because they were covered more by Jumpstart,
Mm.
they would still have that maximum of $300 potentially for the GET fund.
Mm.
Right.
Fund, yeah,
Yeah.
grant fund, and forget which one.
I also think you're gonna learn a lot this year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then it can adjust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I might
Jumpstart's
not be able to answer
400,
it, but-
right? Like, there's a max of 400. That's still a very good, I think locally, that's probably
Yeah.
good number.
And all those numbers were like just in discussion really, as
Yeah.
we've kind of put our heads together. So all of these things will very much be, we're calling it a pilot. We're gonna be willing to change these. This is a,
Too much you don't know
Yeah,
yet.
well,
Exactly.
$10,000 doesn't go very far.
yeah, it can go pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the get funding is gonna be interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because receipts and how do you
Yeah.
know they were used for what?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
do you get organizations to sign off
Yeah.
on it and submit it?
That's
here?
actually
Yeah. You know, my mind goes
Good
to
idea.
the second and third year,
Yeah.
we do this,
Mhm.
particularly assuming it's going to be successful, because it will be, a lot of people will apply. The one thing that comes to my mind is, you know, is there, almost an implied commitment that we're gonna continue to support a child or a family every single year? And that might be a good thing, but it also might be a problem from a funding perspective.
Well,
So that's why I say the first year, you won't have that issue, but the second year, if you get a lot more people that are applying, and then the third year, like at what point do you just maybe run into some of those types of issues? So when you start setting parameters,
Yeah.
which you won't know till you don't know, those are some of the things you're gonna have to give some consideration to.
great program,
Yeah.
excited about it.
Love it.
Any additional questions? If not, all in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Contrary minded?
Wonderful.
None?
You guys, great.
All right, with that, let's move on to item number 3, proposed FCM and UMB policy, and I'll hand it over to the clerk.
Not as exciting as the last two items, unfortunately, but.
You have a PowerPoint slide?
No, I'm not, no. Thank you, guys. No PowerPoints again, because they're not nearly as exciting. So in the package, we have a proposed FCM and UMB conference policy as the agenda item title states. This really is intended to, one, help staff budget, but two, clarify in a consistent and transparent manner how the municipality sends representatives, if at all, to FCM and UMB. So the premise of this essentially is that it looks at both the federal organization, the provincial one that represents elected officials and municipalities. The essence of it essentially means that on an annual basis, the mayor and deputy mayor will represent the municipality at FCM. And then depending on where it is, there may be additional representation. So whether it's in the Maritimes or in the same facility, same geographic location as CAMA, which is the administrator side of things, the CAO may be added on top of it. So last year we had a conversation, I think at this meeting, at January Committee of the Whole, I think, where we had that conversation, and it differs from one municipality to another. So it really is a council decision. It speaks to the budget and expenses. So for this year, for example, we've included an increase in the council expense budget to reflect some of these different attendance of these different events. And then the second piece, which is section 3, of the policy itself, is UMB. So that's the provincial one that's held annually in Fredericton. And we've budgeted accordingly, but the policy states that there will be representation of all of council that is available. And again, speaks to the budgeting and reporting piece. So the essence of it, if I summarize it, it's essentially what's written in the purpose statement, is that the town recognizes the importance of having representation at these different associations and organizations to make sure that we have the opportunity to collaborate with other municipalities, promote regional collaboration, so on and so forth. And it's essentially to make sure that we can put it on paper and have something consistent moving forward. So with that, a motion, and then happy to answer any questions or look at any of the specifics of what is proposed.
I'll move that council approve the proposed FCM and UMB conference policy as presented and bring the policy forward for official ratification at an upcoming regular meeting of council.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Blount, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
I guess my question is not really to the policy, but for those that went to the federal one
Mhm.
this past year, did you find there was many communities like ours represented?
Mhm.
There's more rural municipalities than there is urban ones, which I think was probably the most surprising thing of the whole.
Well, Jason, when you came back, you commented on how
Yeah.
important it was.
I was kind of wondering if we get lost in the noise of it, or if it would
No.
be.
I say the cities do, to be honest, which is.
When we originally brought it
Throw.
forward last year, that's
They
why
have
we
an
brought
urban
it forward,
caucus.
was their feedback was that smaller
Yeah.
municipalities benefit.
And I think it is really important that there are two people there, because there are so many overlapping sessions, that it's good to be able to divide and conquer.
Cause it's a massive, like there's 2,000 people that go to that conference, and so they have sessions split accordingly. So like you can have an hour where there's 4 sessions, and so you're trying to divide and conquer, but most of the municipalities, the majority for sure, are more comparable than the Torontos and the Vancouvers and the Calgarys.
I like it.
Questions?
I like that it's on paper and in a policy, and there's no repeat discussion every year.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, with that, all in favor?
Uh,
Reminded, motion carried. Item, number 4, proposed use and retention of video surveillance policy.
So this is an item that we intend to essentially formalize again to make sure that there's something on paper. It actually started with a conversation with MB Power. For those that were at UMMB may have had conversations with MB Power while you were there, but they're launching a new pilot specifically targeting municipalities to have security cameras on streetlights, essentially as a crime deterrent and for what they call post-incident use. So in the event of an influx of theft or what have you, where this video can be monitored. So the municipality was approached by MB Power on behalf of MBDTI for a project location that they have to request essentially permission to install one of these, which then led to us having conversations with them as well. And we asked for a copy of the agreement that we signed with MB Power and wanted to make sure that we had something on paper that said what we use this for and why. So in that particular instance, it's MBDTI that pays for it, but we pay for the streetlight. So it's on that streetlight. So we wanted to make sure we had something in place that essentially says, sure, you can put that on there, but here's the guidelines that you have to follow to make sure that it clarifies that we're not the holder of the records, that we don't have access to it, so on and so forth. And then we had conversations with MB Power and the RCMP around the usefulness of participating in this 6-month pilot program. We find benefit to it to try through the 6 months because it's non-committal beyond that 6 month, but wanted to make sure that we had this in place regardless. So there are essentially 2 items for discussion, but the policy we're recommending get ratification at a future council meeting, but have discussion and approval in principle regardless. Without diving into word for word, line for line, if you run through, it speaks to video surveillance. So really it covers the why the town would use video surveillance for security purposes, post-incident, who has access to that, and when they can use it, when the town may use photographic evidence, which essentially is when there's a post-incident, an accident, what have you, that the town may need to use. Then it speaks to the records of the recording. So how long the town retains it, how it applies as it relates to RTIPA and the retention and provision of records if requested. And it also speaks to if the town is using the records in any way for provision to the RCMP or for use for an insurance claim. In those types of situations, how they may not necessarily apply to the retention schedule there. Then there's a section, on protection of privacy. So ensuring that the town is not invading in any way the privacy of the general public. Really, it comes down to the use of video surveillance under this policy would happen in 2 different circumstances. 1, on municipal property to make sure that we're protecting municipal property and that we have proof of any theft. And 2, in public spaces for things like post-incidents and crime. So as noted in there, the premise is that if there's a general expectation of privacy, the town would not invade that in any way as it relates to video surveillance. So really it's places that are already public. In this case, it would be public buildings, or in the case of protecting property, municipal buildings and municipal property, or places like streetlights that are already on public property and are not unreasonably invading one's personal privacy. Then the last section is around responsibilities. So really very similar to the policy and the provincial legislation on our TIPA, on the right to information. It designates the municipal clerk as the essentially designate to record the records, and then it outlines the responsibilities of municipal staff to make sure that not everybody has access to these series of footages, basically, and then obviously council to approve the policy. So with that, there's a motion or two, I guess, on the floor, and then happy to dive into any specifics that I didn't cover in that synopsis.
Okay, I move that council approve the proposed policy on the use and retention of video surveillance and bring the policy forward for an official ratification at an upcoming regular meeting of council, and that council direct administration to engage with New Brunswick Power for the purposes of streetlight cameras as part of their pilot program project.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Colwell. Questions on the motion?
Is that part that was
I have a
in?
question.
Colwell?
Is that part?
Yeah, that's okay. I think, was it? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Unless we want to split it out.
I could be mistaking this, but I just want to confirm. MBDTI is paying for,
For their, so they're proposing one, it's not installed yet, but they're proposing one at a project site of theirs. They're paying for it, for that particular one. If we explore others, they're at our discretion, like we would participate in the pilot ourselves. But MBDTI will pay for the one that's installed for their particular project.
what about school, school district property? Or is that, I'm thinking like our thefts at the baseball field.
No street lights down there. Those are, so they're, the way that they're installed is there's a, I don't know if it's I don't know what it is that goes from the top, but there's something that gets screwed in. And so they remove that and they replace this camera with it. So the cameras are manufactured by the same manufacturer as the street lights themselves. So even at Highland Park, for example, we have dusk to dawn lights. Couldn't put one on there. It would have to be on the actual street lights.
So I know we have a potential project down in that area
Mhm.
that we talked about lighting.
Mhm.
Maybe that's an option as a
For
street light.
We could bring a street light down.
You could put a street light down there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool, that's it. I'm just curious why MBDTI would be paying it.
Yeah, that's why, because it's gonna
I
watch,
understand why you'd ask that.
It's for them.
it's gonna watch a project site of theirs.
We
Yeah.
can probably guess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's a limited amount of cameras, so we've had that conversation with MB Power. We had it on the set, so UMMB happened and I suspect they got a lot of interest there because we had a meeting the following week and over half of them were accounted for already. So we said reserve them for us while we go through this process and they were happy to do that,
Like,
so.
they're fantastic at UMNB. They
Yeah.
were super interested.
Yeah.
This is my last question, sorry. Do we have to publicize where they are?
We're going to put signs up based on this to say that they're there. They can't get, well, I shouldn't say they can't get vandalized because I'm sure they could. But the storage is cloud-based, so someone can vandalize the cameras. We'll have a really good shot of them getting up the power pole to do that. But we would publish by the way of signs that we're reporting.
Okay.
I think it's perfect.
And it is online, it is on the cloud, so they can, if they try to damage it, the evidence.
It's gonna be, that's what I mean, we'll have a really
So,
clear shot of them
yeah, so-
climbing up.
Probably won't be
Easily accessible then.
super obvious where the cameras actually are.
No,
You just say this area is being
Yeah.
recorded.
Nice.
So easily accessible if they're on the cloud.
like the footage you mean, yes, yeah, and secure,
Real-time
yeah,
almost.
yes, you can look at it in real time, yeah.
That's amazing.
We can stream it in real time for those that would have access to it. And the same people that have access under this policy would have access under the pilot with MB Power. So you can stream it in real time. Technically, you could watch it 24/7 if you wanted to. MB Power is saying, please don't do that preferably because they pay for data basically. So that fee covers the data for these cameras. And if everyone is watching these cameras 24/7, then their data bill will get really high and then they'll have to change the price. So,
Picturing Trevor with all these monitors.
yeah.
It would be a good
My
way
office
for Trevor, though, because you could see when something needs to be cleaned
Yeah.
and.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
You can randomly check into it.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Smart.
But eventually it'll be like the weather cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
anybody can dial in and
Yeah.
anybody can see it.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably where it's going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is awesome.
And they're doing a 6-month pilot and are already like, they know that they will continue this based on the interest is kind of the verdict that they gave us. they'll see if there's if they all crash at some point, or something that makes them think otherwise, but they're already getting ready for how they can enhance it, and they're targeting municipalities specifically because everyone is having similar challenges to us in a lot of these, smaller communities. They have one, it's a municipal police force, but they basically, they'll have them along the whole main stretch, in that particular municipality, so that the NB Power just said you can't have that many, when they requested them, so if they only have a limited amount, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes after the 6 months and whether or not we can add on.
We have some key intersections. I mean, DPI will cover probably one of those, but we have some key intersections that might be.
And we have we had a long list and then we narrowed it down to 2 basically, and sent our list to the RCMP too and said, if there's an influx of break-ins, what have you, in a particular span of time, what is an ideal location to have post-incident footage of some sort? So we have input from them too. We won't disclose those now as to where they are, but there's a couple options that are top contenders, a few options that are top contenders with a couple of locations. If council looks into them.
I think from my conversation with them at UMNB, if we had an area that had an increase in crime, you could pick up the camera and drop it from one light to another. You could change location.
Yeah, once they're installed, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's a newer, which all of our, like, we don't have any of the old street lights that I didn't know still existed. They can move them very easily. It's a service order. As quick as, as quick as putting in the online form.
Intelligent use of infrastructure, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a really cool.
Very.
Well, the applications are pretty
Very
wide.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Traffic studies,
Yeah.
pedestrian studies.
Yeah.
But they've been doing this in other cities
Yeah.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
a long time, for a long time now.
Yeah.
One more question around the, how our TIPA applies to this footage.
Mhm.
So if we're saying we're limiting who among the staff have access to this footage.
Yeah.
Is it subject to our TIPA? If someone asks for it, we have to give it to them?
Depends on the situation. So it's still subject to our TIPA. Doesn't mean that someone that's requesting it will get access to it. So there's a section, a clause in the provincial legislation that there can't be an unreasonable invasion of a third party's privacy, is the formal wording. So if there is a lot of times, if someone comes in for an RTIPA request related to video surveillance, we'll use the clause in the act and say, what specifically are you looking for? Because we're not just going to give you all of our video surveillance. So we have the means and the right to go back to an applicant and say, you need to specify. If they were to specify a specific thing and that were to invade anyone's privacy in any way, then we would not release the records. They would have the right to appeal to the ombudsman, so on and so forth. This would justify why we wouldn't do that. An example is if some municipal property cameras currently cover the food bank. We're not going to release those records because it's an unreasonable invasion of third-party privacy. So
I guess my thought is that we've built into there that we're gonna get rid of the footage after 30 days.
Yeah.
right? But then if we give it to somebody, it lives on forever.
Yeah.
So it kind of defeats the getting rid of the footage.
and it's very similar to if there's a post-incident, we'll export that and maintain it. And then it stipulates, or there's wording in here that says if we release the records to the RCMP, or would apply in our TIPA case as well, we're not considering that a municipal record any longer because it's out of our custody if we're using the formal term from our TIPA act, our TIPA legislation.
So going off what Nathan said, if I, as an example, let's say it covers parts of a street or a street, and there's a traffic violation, accident, or what have you, and me being a resident, I know that that's being monitored by the town. If I came, would that have to come through the RCMP?
Through the RCMP.
So they're based on our tip, I
Yeah.
can't say I'm specifically looking for this. This is public information.
Because you would be, let's say it's in the perfect view of an accident, we would say it's an unreasonable invasion of the other person that's in the accident that may very well want that footage as well.
And
The
for it's
RCMP,
criminal, the RCMP
yeah.
would have to request, perfect.
Yeah. And the RCMP that's why there's a piece in here where the RCMP would give us a file number so we know we're releasing this to the RCMP. It is their record. It's out of our custody, and we would have record that we provided it under RCMP number ABC 123.
Excellent.
Just love it. Great job.
Love it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
We're really formalizing stuff around here.
God, I love it.
Any additional questions?
Any, yeah, questions on either motion, I guess. So we'll proceed with further conversation with MB Power, but the signing of the agreement won't take place until
We need two different.
the ratification. It can be done in one unless someone wanted to not approve both. Yeah.
Don't see any objections. Then. With that, all in favor of both motions? Reminded, motion carried. Moving on to item number 5, proposed municipal surplus land and land acquisition policy.
So this was spoken about in a closed session related to a specific parcel of land in the mid-fall of last year. An commitment was made to bring this forward to this committee of the whole meeting. Essentially, this also formalizes a process whereby the municipality looks to acquire and or dispose of municipal owned land. So it clarifies it in writing where it's public, the process the municipality will undergo. This obviously has a section where if the municipality is purchasing a piece of land, it can go through the traditional means of a direct sale. So a purchase with a realtor or a sale with a realtor. But there are other means depending on the circumstances. It outlines the public notifications that the municipality would use. And in the case of an RFP, the process, which essentially involves the declaration by a motion of council of declaring a land or a parcel of land as surplus. That does not mean the land will be transferred. It means that the process will be kind of formally initiated, so that staff doesn't go through a long process and then not have the appetite of council to entertain proposals. The proposal process would be undertaken, would stipulate what type of information the municipality would be looking for. Staff would look at it to make sure that it's complete and no kind of further evaluation, and then presentations would be made to council in a closed session under the pursuant to the Local Governance Act. And then a decision would be made whether or not to dispose of it to a proponent or not through that process. There's also the flexibility to permit the municipality to solicit proposals by invite to developers that are looking to develop not-for-profit housing or affordable housing. As we know, it's obviously a challenge that all municipalities are facing everywhere. And this is one of the means that some municipalities take. And this process or policy bodes well with some of the other work that's being undertaken by the municipality as it relates to trying to find means to spur housing development. And then last but not least, it speaks to the acquisition of land. So in a general, let's say there's a parcel of land the municipality thought that staff came across or that we were approached by that would be kind of meeting some objectives in some municipal plan, or it's in an ideal strategic location. We would bring that to council in a closed session to authorize us to negotiate with the owner. We would negotiate with the owner. We would come back in a closed session to be able to receive an approval in principle. We would come back in a public session to ratify it before a sale was done. So it takes at least a month and a half. If you're in the summer, you're 2 months. In today's real estate market, that often is not plausible. The sale will be done. There could be a building built by the time that happens. So this authorizes through essentially dialogue between the CAO and the mayor to entertain essentially intent to purchase with property owners at a plus minus 10% property value, which would then come to council, and it saves that initial step to at least shave that first discussion off. And it has to meet a number of different priorities that are outlined in the policy. So this is essentially a Salisbury version, a combo of several different policies and approaches that are taken by different municipalities that are included in the consultation section of the CRF. But with that, I would say motion and then conversation on any questions or comments.
I'll move that council approve the proposed municipal surplus land and land acquisition policy and bring the policy forward for official ratification at an upcoming regular council meeting.
So moved by Councillor Blinas, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
I have a question on the fact that we're saying with a price of plus or minus 10%, plus 10% I get, but if it's a minus and you're getting an extraordinary deal, do we object to that? Would we, can we not remove
Right.
that? Because if you are in a situation where you can get a deal.
Like a low ball kind of thing. I see what you mean.
I would remove that less
So
10%.
the plus, just the plus, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Great
Okay.
idea.
That's a positive.
Yeah,
There's no
Yeah, that's a
negative
benefit
yeah.
to
Good
the
point.
municipality.
good
Yeah.
point.
So do we need a friendly amendment?
That's fine. Yeah, it sounds like
It'll
there's
be
general
amended
consensus.
when we
Yeah,
go to-
when it's
Yeah.
formally ratified. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a good point. Yes.
Anything less than plus 10% is
Yeah.
a positive.
And the
Yeah.
plus,
Yeah.
the plus is intended so that if a piece of land is worth $10,
Yeah.
ideally, then we would have plus 10% threshold to say, okay, we can go to
Correct.
$11 in
Yeah.
that situation. But if
Of
we can
fair
get it for
market
$2,
Yeah.
then, okay, I see. Yeah.
Correct.
So if there's
exactly.
I think there's general consensus to
Yeah.
remove the
Absolutely, yeah.
modification.
I think this is
Didn't catch
great.
that. That's good.
You didn't-
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
All about percentage.
Well, all of my percentages at work are plus or minus.
Yeah.
Those are my 400%.
Yeah,
I think it was probably honestly a habit to just put plus.
that's what everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
that's a deal.
There you go.
I'm like, why would we stop you at that? Like, hello, no.
I love bargaining.
Zero.
I love bargaining.
You don't want to over control things.
Yeah.
either, right? Like it's like
No.
fit for purpose.
Yes, exactly.
So-
Okay, additional
Yes.
questions?
I loved it. Let's go.
No additional questions? All in favor?
Hi.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. There's no closed session this evening. Moving on to mayor and councillor statements. I'm just gonna make a very quick one on the presentations done earlier this evening. I'd just like to give kudos to our staff. Just the energy in the, not just tonight, but in the community in the last little bit's been amazing. I know the council would echo that, but the presentations that were done earlier this evening, not just professional, but really moving the community forward. The event that Connie Coltis did earlier this month was phenomenal. You can really feel an energy and a vibe in the community. So kudos to the office for everything that you guys are doing. Salisbury 250, I just want to point out to residents that sometimes their passion and vision sometimes in volunteering. Like Elsie Rolls and Karen Stewart talked about Salisbury 250 4.5 years ago on a beautification committee.
Mhm.
They did a couple of banners up at that time, just kind of wanted to create a vibe and an idea, and the idea that staff and council ran with that just from a little bit of an idea that those two ladies floated out. Shows first of all that the community listens and cares and really drives ideas forward from our volunteers. So, again, thank you very much to the staff for all of it. With that.
Oh, I have one. I attended the library board meeting last week and they had some really great things to say about Joe, who's been up helping around the building. Tearing apart a desk and something about siding. So I just wanted to say thank you and kudos to the public works team because they're really doing great work out around the town. And it was very evident at the library board meeting last week.
Awesome.
We've been calling him Bob the Builder lately. He's been keeping busy with miscellaneous projects like that.
That feels right.
There's not a whole lot of snow removal going on.
Don't
No.
jinx that, don't jinx that.
Ice cream.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment because I think that Jason mentioned it earlier. But I love to see all these policies that are being put forward. I mean, I have two thoughts on this. First of all, this is great. We need these policies so that we're not reinventing the wheel all the time.
Mhm.
The other part of me wonders, how the heck do we ever operate without all these policies? You know, like, this is great. And I want to encourage Austin and his team to continue to do that. It's just going to make it so much easier for the council.
I think one of the things that Austin talked about prior to Christmas was when we do meetings, so when we meet every Friday, he talks about different things, and when he brings things up, it is talked about heavily on where policies can be put in place, so kudos to them on taking the conversations, the meetings, and saying, we don't want to talk about this again, let's.
Our meetings used to be much longer without policies.
But even on the policy on FCM and UMND, we had proposed it 2 weeks ago. I think we had a conversation on a Friday and it was like, what other municipalities are doing this? Let's incorporate them all. We took it around with it and brought it forward. So, yeah, I mean,
Way to go, Austin.
Good job.
And I
Teamwork makes the dream work.
I was just gonna say, I think it's important to kind of extend on Joe's comment, like going back to our, our 2021 council days and our staff, right? It's not a knock to them. We were not right-sized. We didn't have the right size team.
Yeah,
to be able to
exactly.
Put all this forward and,
Yeah.
plus
just goes to show like the effort that you can, like, the results you can get when you have a right-sized team.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was having a conversation with a resident who called about property tax. And then one conversation leads to another. And part of the conversation was about just, getting organized and not, not being small. And as you get bigger in any business, you have to revisit how you're structured. And, we have to step up our game and be ready to meet the needs of the residents. And those aren't things that residents see,
Right.
but that's where a lot of the work has to be right now to get ourselves in a good place. So anyway, I love to see this.
Yeah, I have a question for you guys. Did you guys know that Minister Greg Turner was originally from Five Points? Because I didn't know.
No, I didn't know that.
So I had a meeting with him today and he shared that, and his family actually has a connection to the original Fox ranching.
Oh, that's interesting.
So anyway, he knew about the presentation that Bonnie was doing, or Connie, sorry. And, so I told him that I would send him the presentation that they did at the theater. Yeah, it was quite interesting. I'm like, seriously? Did not know
All
that.
roads lead back to
Did
Salisbury.
not know that. How impressive is that?
That's awesome.
Right?
Okay, tell them we need support on getting
Oh.
that bridge fixed over into.
Oh,
Concord.
yeah. Yeah, there was a couple of
No, it's good.
just
Couple of things.
There's another minister that we definitely, knows that knows our areas. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, with that, any additional, comments? This has been a great evening, everyone.
I'll move to adjourn.
Adjourned by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Colwell. All in favor?
Hi.
Contrary minded, motion carried, and we are adjourned.